This was supposed to be just a really quick video, something I could get done while I was redesigning and reorganizing my studio. I didn't have the surface area or the room to do a regular sculpt, couldn't get any painting done, couldn't really do much of anything. You know what, let's just get into it. I'll tell you all about it while I sculpt. So I guess we'll take a step back to 2020, when I picked up my first 3D printer and entered the exciting world of 3D printing. I was absolutely blown away with how big the community was, how supportive it was, how many free designs there were available online. It's insane, really. So naturally, I had a field day and just printed everything, anything that looked useful to me. It was during this time, and I guess over the previous years, that tabletop was making a return. I noticed a lot more people were getting into making miniatures. A lot of it was actually probably because 3D printing was so accessible now. But terrain was coming back big. All these YouTube channels were popping up making dioramas. It was a boom. Now, I never really got into playing any tabletop games. I always wanted to, but never really had a group that was dedicated to giving it a try. I would have loved to try Warhammer or D&D or, anything like that. But the art, the miniatures, the terrain, all that stuff was always really fascinating to me, obviously. It all looks really good. It's super cool stuff. And I like making little crafts and working with my hands with that kind of stuff. So I thought to myself, well, I have a 3D printer now. I should just pick up some modeling software and teach myself how to sculpt, how to 3D model, so I can just print some things and see if I like it, see how it goes. So I know Blender is free, but over the last years of being an artist, I've always seen ZBrush pop up as like the most popular professional software that sculptors use, especially for games and stuff, which is where I've always had my sights, kind of looking at the game industry. They also offer a 30-day free trial, so I gave that a try. And I really liked it. Probably mostly because it was something new. Just had the whole new and exciting thing going. I feel like I had a bit of a jump start because I had been drawing for so long. I had no experience in sculpting at all, especially digitally sculpting. But something about it just felt new and fresh. It was exciting. So I ended up picking up ZBrush. And to be honest, I didn't really use it a whole lot. I maybe used it a couple of weeks. Obviously not enough time to fully learn the software. I could do basic stuff in it, but definitely not long enough to do anything substantial. And then it kind of just fell to the wayside. It just became something else, just another project on the back burner while I returned to painting and just sticking with illustration and picking up any work I could through that. So now we're caught up to the present. Obviously, I'm getting into sculpting. I'm starting to really enjoy it. I'm using clay mostly. I haven't really touched digital since 2020. And a couple of weeks ago, probably like 2 weeks ago, I started ZBrush up because, again, I'm getting into sculpting. Let's give this a try. And I had no idea what the hell I was looking at. I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember how to even start sculpting because there's a few steps you need to they're simple steps, but there's just a few things you got to click before you can even start sculpting, and I couldn't remember any of it. So I closed it. I was like, okay, well, this is going to be a problem for future me again. Well, future me was busy pretty much all last week, giving my studio a makeover and just deep cleaning it, reorganizing it all. It pretty much took up most of my week, but I did want to get a video out. I just wasn't sure what I was going to do because I didn't have the time or the space to do clay sculpture, unless it was just something small and quick, and I didn't want to just do like another Pokemon or something like that. So I had around 2 days before I would have liked to get the video out, and I thought, well, I could probably learn ZBrush really quick, or at least learn enough to get something done in a day. And if I time it right, I can probably print it out and paint it, and it'll be a nice quick little video. It'll be a fun little challenge. I get the ticking clock, the clickbait, all the good stuff. I decided I'd sculpt Black Panther because I wanted to get the sculpture done to coincide with the movie's release, but I must have written it down wrong or read it wrong or something. I thought this movie was coming out the 18th, so I already missed that anyways, but I still wanted to get something done. The design's interesting, so this was perfect, really. I didn't include like the learning process here because I didn't follow any tutorials that you kind of follow step by step. I feel I don't learn very much from those. Mostly what I do is look into the documentation and then just look up some basic function tutorials just that show me the layout and how to get started, and then I learn best by doing. So I kind of just jump in and then look up issues as they arise. It's a much more natural workflow for me. Usually works out. Some software is not as forgiving, so you can't quite do that. But ZBrush, obviously there's tons of functions that I really don't even need to know. So as long as I got the basics, I could get this done. And well, kind of to my surprise, the sculpting process was pretty painless. I ran into some issues, of course, just looking things up, trying to figure out what I need to do. There's a lot of things hidden in submenus. And I know I'm making a lot of errors and mistakes, and I could be doing things more optimally. I could have given her a much more dynamic pose, but again, I had the whole ticking clock thing. The original plan was to pose her more dynamically after I had blocked her in, but I was looking at the time, and I wanted to make sure I had enough time to print it, so I just went with something pretty generic and simple. It was more important that I got the design done. And on that front, I'm pretty happy. I think I succeeded. I knew that when I printed this, not every detail would show up properly, and for that matter, it'd probably help hide some of my mistakes. So keeping that in mind really helped the whole workflow out, just remembering that I'm going to be 3D printing this, and it doesn't need to be super perfect. Now I just have to look up how to render this thing really quick. I like to always create some sort of artwork in these videos. It's usually just a quick sketch or a quick speed painting. This video is a little out of order. I didn't start with the sketch. But since I have this nice rendering here, I'm thinking I'll do a quick background speed paint and maybe throw some color overlays on her just to give her some color. Okay, so at this point I have the sculpture done. Making pretty good time, to be honest. I thought that I was going to struggle a lot more because I didn't remember anything about ZBrush. I was essentially starting from zero. So far it's a success, right? Learn ZBrush in 24 hours, get Black Panther sculpted. Check, success. Now I want to print it. So I'm sure you've probably figured it out by now, but this is where I ran into all of my problems. You can see a graveyard of failed prints here, and a lot of me just testing different settings, trying to fine-tune things, trying to get the optimal support placement. To summarize everything, I started the FDM print, and I also have a resin printer. I started that one as well at the same time. I figured if one failed, I could fall back on the second one to paint, and I could still get the video done in time. Essentially, they both failed multiple times. I kept trying to print on the FDM printer in one pass, so I just left it whole, standing upright, and it kept failing at the hands. So honestly, I was expecting some failure. I kind of left myself a little extra time for it. I thought wherever it failed, I would just measure the difference, slice the model, print the rest, and then just glue it together after the fact and fill any seams with clay, basically fixing it in post. The prints were coming out pretty good, so that idea would have worked, but then after I sliced it, I was getting more failures on those sliced parts, and it was just compounding. It would have been too much cleanup at the end, basically making it impossible to finish in time anyways. So I kind of ditched the idea of the FDM print. While all this was going on, I had checked my resin printer. It failed its first print, didn't print anything at all. Started it again, and then supports on that failed. I eventually realized that even though I was leveling the bed, that I moved it to an uneven part on the table, and the table was actually very unlevel. So that was the problem. So I just re-leveled everything, cleaned everything out, and started that again. But at this point, there's no way I'm going to get the video done in time. So I get everything printing again, and I just start to refocus my efforts on getting a video for the week, which was the studio tour, which was something I wanted to do anyways. I was just planning on doing that in a week or two once I had lived in the studio and kind of fully figured out everything's placement and stuff. But it is what it is. So I've already cut my losses and accepted that this video wasn't going to hit my self-imposed deadline. I feel I did complete my initial challenge of getting the sculpt done in 24 hours. I just couldn't get the print done, which ironically was from rushing so much, because if I had just taken the proper steps initially, it would have printed fine. I normally don't have problems with printing, so I didn't think that this was going to happen, but that's usually how it goes, right? Especially with 3D printing, it is a bit finicky, especially when you're not thinking everything through right off the bat. Anyways, during all this, I zeroed in my settings and my supports pretty clean on my FDM print, and I resolved the issues with the resin printer. That was going fine. I knew that this video was going to be a next week kind of deal, so I had some breathing room again. I decided I'd quickly learn how to key the model so I could print it all out separately. Now, keying on a model is its own black hole, and I know that there's a bunch of ways to do it. There's much cleaner ways to do it than I did. I'm fully aware that I did a very quick and dirty, ugly way, but I didn't want to spend the next few weeks learning proper keying and the tolerances between the software and the printer. It's definitely its own black hole abyss of knowledge and trial and error that I'll get to, but for this, I just wanted to get the basics down and crudely do it, and I did. It was successful. Everything fits together nicely. There are some ugly seams, but as I've said, I'm just going to fill that with clay and paint over it. Shouldn't be too noticeable in the end. So now I finally have everything printed properly. I even have a successful resin print, which has a couple of misprints on it, but I'm not going to paint this one now that I have the FDM one. I just wanted to get both things printed. All that's really left to do is to glue the parts together, fill the seams, and start painting, finally. So let's get into all that. Some of these joints are really jank. I know, believe me, I know. So I just had to tape it up, use a lot of super glue, and hope that there's enough contact to get a bond going. Once she's dry, I'll get some holes in her feet, mount her to an MDF base. After this, I'm definitely gonna learn how to properly key something so I can get some cleaner results. Anyways, I'm gonna go downstairs and get the base ready while she dries. I gotta cut out some MDF pieces and just glue them together. So, be right back. Well, that certainly took a while. A 2-day video turned into a week-long endeavor. I guess that's just how it goes sometimes though, huh? Especially when you're rushing and you throw in something like 3D printing that's kind of finicky already, and I guess I was asking for it. Still though, I had a lot of fun. I got what I wanted out of it. I think I know enough about ZBrush now to mess around with it a little bit more and do some more 3D work. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I do plan on doing a bit more of it and getting more into 3D printing, coming up with some more original content as well. Besides that, I think I've pretty much said everything I want to say on this one. I kind of talked through the process of this one a little bit more just to show everyone what it took to get here. I thought it was kind of funny that this video ballooned into such a bigger production. I think it's the longest video I've made now, so it's pretty amusing. I hope you all enjoyed it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Check out ascentintomadness.com for more of my work and all of my socials. Also, I'll be putting the model file of Black Panther on my Patreon, so if you'd like to print one out for yourself, be sure to check that out. So I think that about finally wraps this one up. Yeah, that should do it. I'll see you all next week.